Okay, KIRK NURMI, thanks again for joining me. You know, I thought of you immediately after day one of Trooper Michael Proctor's testimony. I sent you a message. I was like, we have to jump on. I know that it's not finished yet, the cross-examination, which could potentially take all day Thursday. But I wanted to break down what we've heard thus far. So how are you, first of all?
Doing great. Yes, I was watching it along with you when you sent me the message there. It was certainly something. It was probably more than expected, really. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting in the whole context of this case. And like you said, today it's what is the 11th.
Yeah.
We're on an off day today, so it'll be picking up tomorrow. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
You're right. And I think a lot of us were not expecting what we heard. I mean, I think of myself as not a naive person. The language, I had never heard some of these terms before. I was just like, wow, this is really, really gross. But you know, we can get to that. I want to point out something that I did the other day on Twitter. I made a comparison between Proctor and Mark Fuhrman. And, you know, maybe I should have clarified because obviously Fuhrman is known for planting evidence. He was convicted of perjuring himself. And my comparison was more like dirty cop type of thing, or maybe not so much a stand-up cop. I don't have proof that he planted anything, but what I do have proof of now is that he was certainly not objective. So I mean, I kind of stand by that comparison. I don't know what you think about that, but I do.
You know, I didn't see your exact reference. I saw our friend Sharon McCullough post something similar
Yep.
about that, and I think it maybe to me doesn't go to the evidence or what have you yet, at least not yet, right? We haven't heard the
Right.
defense's case, but it goes to the credibility. And to me, that's really where the comparison is most apt, because you have someone now who's the lead investigator on this case, who is being accused of doing some inappropriate things, not just inappropriate jokes, what have you,
Hmm.
but inappropriate things behind the scenes in order to frame Miss Reed. And here you have angst against Miss Reed on full display. So to me, that and credibility doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's not just this witness.
Yeah.
It goes, you know, Sallyport videos that were not adequately explained. It goes to many different things in the case. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's more in the court of public opinion maybe than in front of the jury, but I think
Mm.
the jury probably has enough in front of it now to begin to question the credibility. Some all, you know, they must have had a hell of a phone sale off in Canton when all these guys are getting rid of their phones and throwing them away at military bases, things like that. And that's when I talk
Yeah.
about credibility. It's that idea that there's all these problems with the credibility, and then your lead investigator is saying the things he says about the defendant and the defense
Yeah.
attorney.
And that was my point, and I should have potentially explained it a bit better. But I mean, at this point, Proctor might be looking worse than Mark Fuhrman with some of the stuff he was saying. And there's something, I'm sure you've heard of it, whataboutisms. And this is not me being political at all, but it goes both ways. Somebody will say, lock up Donald Trump. And then someone else says, well, what about Hunter Biden? And again, I'm not being political any which way, but that's a whataboutism. So I saw a lot of this yesterday. Proctor says this, well, what makes this different than, you know, something that Karen said about so-and-so, or this text message with Turtle Boy? Well, they're not law enforcement, and they're not investigating a murder. So to me, that there was a lot of whataboutisms going on yesterday, because I don't think anyone knew what to say. Anybody who had defended Proctor, or who had, I guess, put themselves out on the line saying, no, he's a stand-up guy, blah, blah, blah. I don't think anyone really knew how to explain themselves there.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of that as well. I posted, you know, how can there be any credibility to this investigation? What Proctor's saying after you know what he said. A lot of people say, oh yeah, people are going to make jokes. You make jokes about your clients, whatever. Okay, but that's different because we're talking about in the heat of the investigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
If this was after she was convicted or what have you, it would
Yes,
just be
yes.
tacky. It wouldn't be something. Instead of, okay, we're going to do this, and you know, it's not just the jokes too, because the image that gets into my mind, or at least in terms of an evidentiary issue, is the idea that he's sitting there on 10 o'clock at night with her cell phone, not a mirror image of her cell phone, not going through the computer. You know, there's processes where you mirror image the hard drive and you put that all onto, you know, a computer or what have you, so you can look at this stuff without altering it. He's thumbing through this evidence and he's looking for nudes, and he's, you know, he's trying to pretend he's not now. He's looking for nudes and etc. And it just, you combine that, and going back to what I said earlier about credibility, the red Solo cups, the grocery bags, all that stuff, right? That's how you're collecting biological or potential biological evidence. And you're treating a piece of computer evidence like it's just your toy. And you know, he should not have, he should have that phone imaged, he shouldn't touch it, etc. And you know, the other thing that I thought was interesting that comes up beyond all these jokes is, you know, a guy like this, does anybody believe that he really stopped after seeing one text from between Miss Reed and Mr. Yannetti? I don't believe it.
That's really interesting. I didn't even think about that. What I did think about, something similar, was the fact this was August or maybe June, fast forward, you know, many months later, the text messages between him and maybe it was friends or fellow officers, they seemed a bit rehearsed or staged, the way they brought up the third party defense of John getting beat up, when they said, you know, she's gross, she's blaming, you know, that felt very just planted, I guess. Like, we need, you know what I'm saying? I don't know why I felt that, but I just did. It seemed too convenient to have these texts just in case anyone looked.
Right. And maybe that could be correlated to what Trooper Proctor found on Miss Reed's phone, going through the attorney-client privileged information. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that don't make, I mean, you know, we talk about, I believe it was Higgins who destroyed his phone or tossed it on the military base, but he kept all those text messages with Karen Reed, right?
Right.
And there was this, you know, constant level of misogyny in this case, in the presentation of it. And that's why I think the Commonwealth too is falling down, because now we have more witnesses. Because, you know, you think about that text exchange between the two of them, and what was that meant to elicit? It was really meant to shame her, right? You know, her sexuality was bad, his is okay, she's terrible, she's a slut, whatever, you know, word you want to use on that. And then you come back to Trooper Proctor and you can see this continuing line of misogyny throughout this investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if, not to digress, but I think that if people can't acknowledge the fact that when you get a new phone, the normal, quote unquote, normal thing to do, if we're going to go there, is you just throw it in a drawer, or you leave it somewhere, or maybe you go sell it to the Apple store, but you don't toss it, you know, in a dumpster at a military base. That's my opinion. But yeah, let's just go. I just want to go through a few things that could possibly be argued or could possibly help Proctor in a way. Number one, the fact that they basically stopped referring to him as the lead investigator. He kept referring to himself as this caseworker. I think that they're trying to mitigate a lot of this. I don't know if you agree, but I found that to be interesting. Up until yesterday, we all thought of him as the lead investigator.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of words can be interesting, and you're right, they are trying to kind of mitigate his role, but you know, it's kind of obvious through cross-examination, what have you, that he was the case agent. And that goes to a little bit of a credibility issue. You know, the jury is going to likely pick up on this change in verbiage. They know what he did, they know his role. Whatever terms you want to put on it, I don't think it's going to make it change.
Okay, do you think that the beginning of this, of Lally's questioning to him, he made it very clear that he never questioned anyone alone. He never questioned the witnesses alone, except for maybe one couple or something like that. He claims he had no relationship with Brian Albert, even though we all know that his sister is best friends with Julie Albert, or very good friends. I don't know how you want, to I guess admit to that or address that. He didn't seem to address that, but I felt like at the beginning they were really trying to establish him as this generally decent guy, this decent investigator, and then again, I don't think anybody was ready for what was to come at all.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, they want, like I say, going back to this word, I guess the word of the day is credibility, but they're trying to boost his credibility by making him look like this guy was involved in this investigation and he's flawed, but his investigation wasn't, kind of thing, right? But we know, we saw, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so of cross-examination, we saw that start to fall apart with some of the language he used being thrown back in his face and him being forced to say it. The
C
judge
word,
forced him to say, it's forced him to say the C word instead of spelling it out, right? And we're going to hear that, I think, throughout cross-examination. He's going to be forced to confront that language all throughout his investigation. But part of the point being is in that 20 minutes, we also heard about, the text exchange related to gifts, related to giving his wife a gift, or they were going to give him a gift, but then they're going to direct it to his wife.
right?
And that just seems, that's just shady. I mean, it just looks, instead of saying no, you say, well, I'll give it to my wife,
Yeah.
Sure, that's shady.
There's a couple instances of that. I thought, obviously, he could have said that's inappropriate, blah, blah, blah. And then again, with Yuri Buchanan, he liked something about David. You know what I mean? Like they're not telling him, hey, that's inappropriate. Maybe don't do that. Maybe don't text that. They like it. They don't do anything about it. So going back to these text messages between the officers, between his friends, where his friend said, well, is the homeowner in trouble whose lawn that John O'Keefe was found on? He said, nope, he's a Boston police officer. I mean, that right there is like, well, what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean? That means you're not even gonna entertain the fact that anything else could have happened here. You're just gonna take, just because he's a Boston police officer. That was interesting as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it did kind of seem like that gave him like immunity idol. No, he's a cop, so he's not under suspicion. Well, and that feeds right into the defense's theory of, that they're not even going to go in the house. He's a police officer, therefore he's above suspicion and above reproach, and we're not even going to consider that. That really is not going to sit well with jurors, especially when you talk about the amount of people in that house and what could have been done if these police officers, I mean, are they not looking out for one of their own? What's going on? So yeah, there's a lot there that people might take different ways, but I certainly think that, that when you get to closing argument, the words like that will come, and phrases like that will probably be something the defense keys on when they talk about this conspiracy.
Right.
They couldn't go in the house full of cops because they had the immunity idol. So they got to go find Karen Reed, who they don't like.
And that's very interesting, and it's very clear they don't like her. And I guess I was also confused at how does he know so much about her? It's kind of interesting how he knows all of this, her medical history and this and that, and oh, she's gross, she has no ass, excuse me. But it's like, how do you know all this information about her? I was curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is it is interesting because we've learned, I guess, that there's this kind of close insulary community there, right? That they're all out drinking together.
But they don't know each other. They're not friends, Kirk.
But they don't know each other, right?
That.
And they're all going to the bar together, and they're sexting with each other, And so on one hand, these guys are in a texting flirtatious relationship, whatever you want to call it, with Karen, and then on the other hand, they're bad mouthing her, etc. So yeah, I mean, you can really tell that there's a lot of chaos going on and a lot of lack of professionalism,
right? And
to say the least.
To say the least. Exactly. And
Yeah.
on January 29th, I believe it was, or possibly the next day, that's when Proctor told his buddies or his coworkers or colleagues that he has a solid case. He has overwhelming evidence to charge Karen. That was literally either the day of or possibly the next day, but yet you have them searching around a crime scene that they didn't block off for the next month, I want to say. Well, what would be the purpose of that if they already had overwhelming evidence on the first or second day?
Well, listen, it's not to say, we talk about this conspiracy, and when people say as well, listen, there's no way there could be this conspiracy with all these people involved. Somebody would say something. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? But I
Same.
think there is the reality that it doesn't take as much as maybe people think, because Trooper Proctor is going around saying we have the evidence against her. She did it, right? And that funnels into the circle, and that changes and alters the view that everybody is putting on this evidence. Like Karen Reed did it. Oh, and then it goes to the EMTs and sitting around in this group meeting they had, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't take much to say, Michael says that she did it, and this is why, and then it just becomes enforced in people's brains, and their memories can be suggested, and they know where the group think is going with this investigation. Karen did it, so they automatically filter. They want to provide every bit of evidence they can that makes Michael happy, that shows him that Karen did it.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I've said this many times. It's hard to stomach a conspiracy, right? It's hard to sit there and try to I guess prove that so many people were in on something. But I tend to agree with you. It doesn't take that many people to just exacerbate something or maybe ensure that something goes a certain way. That being said, I don't think a conspiracy at this point matters one way or another, only because of what we're hearing and what we're seeing. And at this point, I would hope that the jury can see that Karen Reed, her constitutional rights weren't necessarily upheld here. If you've got Trooper Proctor saying all these things about her and about the investigation, and just going back to what I don't know if you caught what they said about the Emmys office, about how they initially, the Emmys office ruled it, I guess, undetermined. They're very upset about that. They were, he said that he went in there, he stated his case. And I get that the Emmy works for the state. He's obviously works for the state as well. They should be aligned. And it was very clear that he was very upset that they were not aligned.
Yeah, and I think that's demonstrative of, a lot of people think that medical examiners are these objective people, but they're really police officers with an MD and a white coat instead of a badge. That's really what they are. And I think that the police officers expect adherence to their line of their theory, if you will, and which happens more often than not. But so it's kind of, I think, what we're seeing in there is a sense of betrayal. And I remember, I think there was some interesting dialogue, or he was referring to somebody as a stupid something or other, and it really seemed like he was referring to the ME instead of Karen Reed, and he tried to really dissuade and said, no, I was talking about Karen Reed. But it looked, in that text exchange, it looks like they were calling her stupid as well, because she wasn't complying with their means.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I've heard that before. I'm not going to say that's so out of the ordinary, where a police officer is like, okay, this is what we believe happened. We're going to tell you why, and you should go. I don't think that's out of the ordinary. So I think that's normal. It just didn't look great on top of everything else that came out.
It shouldn't be normal, though, because I think an ME's opinion on cause of death should be without regard to the police theory of what happened, because it's supposed to be objective. It's supposed to be an investigation. It's not supposed to be confirmation of tunnel vision on part of the police.
And I agree with you. I'm just saying, I've heard this many times before.
I've heard this.
I mean, this was, But you're absolutely right. It should be objective, and yeah, it shouldn't be swayed by police. But to me, it's not uncommon. Now, something else that he said I thought was interesting, and it was volunteered. He wasn't asked, but he did say the first thing he noticed was John's arm when he saw John, his body at Good Samaritan. And I thought that was interesting. That seemed a bit planned, or a bit rehearsed, if you will, just adding that part about the arm, but I can't quite figure out why yet.
No, and maybe we're going to get into that a little bit more cross-examination, but one potential reason why that would be so problematic to Trooper Proctor is that is pretty clear evidence that stands against his theory, right? That is the most problematic evidence. If he's really looking to flame Karen Read, that evidence of the injuries, particularly on his arm, but other injuries as well, but those injuries on John's arm are going to stand out as being distinct from what the case he's trying to make.
Right. Now, this is just a quick pivot here, but Friday, this is going to be interesting, and you can clarify this for me, or correct me on anything that I kind of get confused on. But as far as I know, they might not let some of the defense's witnesses, expert witnesses, testify at this point. Am I right? Now they have to testify without the jury at first. And then I guess Cannoni makes the decision on whether or not the jury gets to hear them, because the prosecution was not aware of these experts. And what I gather is that these are the feds. I don't know if I'm correct on this, or if you know anything about that.
I don't know any more than you've stated, but really what's going to happen is that the relevancy and what have you of the witness testimony is kind of unknown, right? The defense hasn't interviewed these people. The prosecution hasn't interviewed these people because there were some protests on the Commonwealth's part that they hadn't interviewed these people, and the defense wants to call them.
Right.
So what will be done then is kind of a what I would call it, what we would call in Arizona, an offer of proof, saying, here, Judge, this is how these witnesses are relevant and reasonable to the defense's case. This is why they should be let in. So they get all that information out there, so it's on the record. So it's not just, hey, we're denying a particular witness.
Yeah.
The defense puts in all the context of why these witnesses are important. And I think it would be hard pressed for the judge. Now, she's done a lot to help the Commonwealth as far as I'm concerned, but she would be hard pressed to deny a defendant's Sixth Amendment rights to present a full defense by denying these witnesses. Their testimony would have to be entirely irrelevant.
I don't really put it past her, based on, as you stated, sort of the past actions. And I guess I'm not sure if it was you who said, well, generally the judge will sort of side with the state, not outwardly, not admittedly, but you can always kind of see that. I mean, in this case, it's incredibly obvious. And when I heard about this, I was like, oh man, there's no way she's going to allow anything that makes Karen not look guilty allowed. That's sort of where my head went.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, she might be boxed in, because there's certain points where she's been boxed in and has had to give in. I mean, I think about the motion we had, the pretrial motion for the different courtroom, and she was really boxed in there because the defense point was beyond really any legitimate argument. But she made a point in her ruling to say, well, we've done trials in this courtroom for X amount of years and it hasn't been a problem. And then these guys bring it up and what have you. So yeah, she's very unhappy with that. Judges can get very unhappy when they're forced to protect the rights of the defendant. But
right.
I think we've seen that. But ultimately, if she knows she's going to get boxed in here at a certain point in time.
Now, if you were defending Karen Read after the state presents their case, do you think you would you submit a motion to dismiss the entire case based on what we've seen so far?
Well, yeah, but that's not as profound a question as it might seem to be.
Yeah.
That is typically something that has to be done in order to preserve a defendant's appellate rights. Like that's the case in Arizona, right? You have,
Yeah.
no matter, yeah, I mean, you could have somebody on video tape committing the crime and the defense attorney's still going to make a motion to dismiss because that's the only way the appellate rights are preserved. So that's what I'm saying. It's not really a matter of choice. It's not really a matter of like, hey, would you be thinking about this or that? It's almost a matter of course, I should say. So
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. No, that's what I say. It's not one that's gonna. I didn't mean to sound insulting.
You didn't.
But it's not that. It's a matter of course. It's not something that's necessarily going to. Yeah, they're going to make their record. They're going to what have you, right? And it's not going to be in front of the jury, but they're going to make that motion just to preserve the appellate rights.
So that generally happens all the time then after the state presents their case, generally.
Yeah, I mean, in Arizona, it's pretty much automatic. It'd be malpractice not to because you're waiving your client's right to an appeal.
So
now,
that's
in the Commonwealth or not, I don't know, but I think it is in most jurisdictions.
What are the odds, I guess, what's a case where they did that? Can you think of a murder trial where they actually, because I'm just thinking now, like after the state presented their case, like even with David Swift, I didn't think, I kind of thought he did it with David and Karen Swift, but I just didn't really see a whole lot of non-circumstantial evidence presented where I thought they had a case. And I could have sworn that one maybe could have gotten dismissed, but I was wrong.
The one that comes to mind is Michael Turney out here in Arizona. Sarah Turney was the podcaster that kind of pushed for the trial out here in Maricopa County. Okay. And that case was dismissed at directed verdict, what we call directed verdict out here in Arizona. So the defense made a motion to dismiss the case, and Judge Myers dismissed the case before it went to the jury, before the defense presented a case.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. I did not know that. I'll have to look that up. Well, just, we've got this whole day, I want to say on Wednesday, where I'm just going to be freaking out. I feel like I'm going to be very unproductive because I'm just going to be glued here. I mean, I just think about Proctor. I think about the weird Sallyport video at this point. I'm not saying he did anything, but it is weird they didn't address the skipping, and it's activated by a motion sensor. I mean, why not address that? That seemed really shady.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think there was anything shady about it. Like maybe there was, maybe there wasn't, but it appears so when you don't adequately explain it. I was on Court TV yesterday and they were kind of saying, oh, Lolly did say this. No, not really. I disagree with Julie Grant on that point. He didn't really clarify the inverse nature of the video, what have you. So, I mean, that is something that, and because what came out of the defense's mouth right afterwards is this inverted video, and we talk about credibility, right? And we talk about those things, like, for example, we go back when we hear everything we heard about Proctor yesterday, go back to the defense's opening statement and hearing all these things that we're going to see, and they are cashing those checks, so to speak. And that's one thing that can be very important in a trial, making sure you cash those checks, you present that, whether the jury believes it or not, you present the evidence that you promised to deliver.
Right. And again, I've stated this before as well. I felt like Lally didn't get ahead of anything because his opening statement was very confusing. I think he should have addressed everything about Proctor that we were going to hear. I think he should have addressed everything about the witnesses and how crazy this conspiracy was. But I do think that, and this could be argued, but possibly this was the smartest thing Lally did, was kind of get ahead of some of these text messages so people wouldn't be as shocked when Alan Jackson got up there and started to just eviscerate him based on his character and these text messages. I was like, okay, I'm actually I see what he's doing. And even though I'm shocked and I'm horrified, seems like a horrible witness at this point. I get it. I completely get it.
Yeah, I mean, that is, really a basic trial tactic, is to kind of what they call remove the sting. So you want to take out all that bad information on direct in a way that you do it. So when the opposing side does it, then it's not seem like you're hiding the ball, and it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like, and you're couching it in your own terms, you're mitigating it in your own terms. Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I think I might have mentioned this to me. If I'm Lawley, I feel like my case is such a simple one that I don't need 22 days and 50 whatever witnesses, right? And this is part of the problem in terms of everything that he's been doing. But yeah, I think that was his best trial tactic, and I think there's something else, and I don't know how many. I think he's got like 80 people on the witness list. I think the other thing that he's done that it is smart is to bury, because look, he knows that Proctor is not his shining star, right? But he also knows he has to call him, because the alternative is not calling him and letting the defense call him, and then that's worse, right? But he's seemingly burying him in the middle, if you will. So if he does in fact call these 20-something, 30 witnesses, then Proctor is 2 weeks in the rearview mirror by the time his case closes.
Right. And just quickly going back to the Sallyport video, I don't necessarily think the inverted thing is the biggest issue. I thought it was more about when it was skipping and when it was missing parts of. I thought that was stranger, and that looked worse than the inverted thing. And like you said, it probably wasn't a big deal, but why not just get in front of it and address it? Oh, by the way, so we're not all thinking that it's suspect. Okay, so just quickly, just to wrap things up.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you think that we're going to see on Wednesday at this point, from what we saw in the first 20 minutes?
We're gonna see some fireworks. I mean, I think that the defense was confident enough that they put Trooper Proctor on their witness list, meaning I think they feel like they have a minefield of information on this trooper, and I would not be surprised if we saw Trooper Proctor plead the fifth at some point in time during this trial, which would just devastate the Commonwealth's case.
Oh no. Okay. Oh man, I just got so sick for Wednesday, because like I said, you should have seen me yesterday. I was jumping up and I was like, oh my gosh, did he just say leaky balloon knot? I don't even know. I didn't even know that word. I honestly, I was like, what? Yeah. Yep. Oh my gosh. Well, Kirk, all of your info is in the episode notes. As always, you are such a wonderful voice of reason. I love how even you are about everything. I love how you just tell it like it is. And it's just, you spit facts, and it's really, it's genuine and it's refreshing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Like I say, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Lauren.
Never a bother.
Never a bother.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm just going to stop recording.
You
I'm
bet.
actually going to get this out.